Welcome to the Trent England Show. Welcome to what we expect to be the last week of the Oklahoma legislative session. Of course, that is several weeks early, but hey, they've been in session just about continuously since last fall, right? So, you know, it's not like anybody's getting shorted legislative business days here, but we do expect the governor to sign the state budget at some point in the next couple of days. That has not happened yet, even though the Senate passed it last Wednesday, the House passed it last Friday. So all that has to happen now for the state budget is for the governor to put her John Hancock on it. Or Mrs. Hancock or whatever. I don't know. All that has to happen is for the governor to sign it, and then that part of the legislative session will be over. The state will have a budget for July through the end of next June. That's the state's fiscal year. We're going to talk more about that this week, but I've got a couple important stories I want to cover today, so we'll get to state budget stuff a little bit later in the week. Vinny Vernuccio from the Mackinac Center is going to be with us tomorrow. He is another expert on labor union laws and labor union tactics and labor union reforms, and so he's going to be with us tomorrow talking about some of these things nationwide, talking about how these things apply in Oklahoma. If you're really interested in that, make sure you tune in tomorrow, but also you can go back and find the show that we did a couple of weeks ago with Jamie Lund from the Freedom Foundation, talking about some similar issues and also talking about school districts and where those things intersect. So we're covering that issue. It's a big issue in Oklahoma, obviously. We've been covering it right here on the show. I have two missing money stories, two very different kinds of missing money stories for you here this morning, and two blue state blues stories. Let's get right to it. Missing money. A group of county commissioners is nervous that their fund for roads and bridges, which should have about $230 million, seems to be showing a zero balance. Now look, they pointed out that this could all be some paperwork mistake, right? This could be some temporary thing. I'll tell you what I think it is in just a moment, but they're asking for an audit of the Oklahoma Department of Transportation to make sure that the $230 million is actually there. Now, a couple things about this, right? Obviously, it is not unreasonable for anybody in Oklahoma, when it looks like money's gone missing, to say, has it gone missing, right? I mean, not to just assume that it's an innocent mistake after the rainy day fund raid, right? You remember Governor Mary Fallon and then Secretary of Finance Preston Dorflinger saying, no, we can just take money out of the Oklahoma Rainy Day Fund, which is actually called the Constitutional Reserve Fund. We can just take money out of it whenever we want, as long as we promise to pay it back by the end of the fiscal year. That's their position. Blatantly unconstitutional, totally illegal, but they did it. They drained the fund all the way down to nothing, to zero. And they did then come along later and put the money back, but totally defeats the purpose of having a constitutional reserve fund, colloquially called a rainy day fund. We have seen that, right, over the last couple of years in Oklahoma. What else have we seen? We've also seen the state health department almost completely run out of money, to the point where it almost couldn't pay its bills. It almost could not make payroll at the Oklahoma State Department of Health. And what did we find out after that happened? We found out after that happened that they had been illegally running deficits and creating debt for 7 years at the Oklahoma State Department of Health, right? So, I mean, it's certainly excusable for Oklahomans to get a little bit nervous when it looks like money has gone missing. Of course, we also have the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority's "the dog ate my waiver" issue, where they said, well, we used to have this waiver from the federal government. We could spend all this federal money on our state teaching hospitals, and it went away somewhere, and we're not sure what happened with it, and basically causing a loss of $90 million, a shortfall of $90 million for state hospitals. So given all of that, the $230 million fund that's supposed to go to county road and bridges expenses, it's understandable that county commissioners would be nervous about it. Now, there might be another thing that you might say when you hear about a $230 million state fund, which is, wow, that's a lot of money in the great state of Oklahoma to be out there sitting around. And look, government is going to set some money aside, and you're going to have funds that get bigger and get smaller as money is collected and as money is spent. But it is another reminder, by the way, that look, Oklahoma state government does have a lot of these pots of money sitting around, like TSET. I mean, all of these big pots of money. And we, the taxpayers, should be very attentive to, why is it that we really have all these pots of money sitting around? Is this a wise way to run a government? And I'll say, particularly with regard to the county roads and bridges money, I think it's a little bit crazy that we put all this power in the hands of the state to then take this money and send it back to the counties. I don't understand why we give the state such an outsized role in this part of local government. I don't know. I mean, there are costs and benefits, arguments on both sides, I'm sure, but it raised some questions for me when I saw this story. Okay, missing money part 2. This is a very different kind of missing money story, but still, it's money that gets missed. I'm trying to tie these things together. You can decide if it's tendentious or not. Teacher pensions. How much did you hear during the fake strike about teacher pensions? A little? Maybe a little, maybe, probably nothing, right? This almost never gets talked about when people are talking about teacher pay. And my friends out at the American Enterprise Institute put together a post talking about teacher pay nationwide, but they used Oklahoma as an example for one facet of teacher pay, that's teacher pensions, that does not get enough talk. And their point in this post is that there's just a lot of teacher compensation that never gets talked about because everybody wants to focus on cash wages, right? Cash wages. What did they write here? Oklahoma teachers accrue new pension benefits each year. Obviously, that's how a pension works. With a present value equal to 30% of their annual salaries, subtract their own contribution of 7%, and employer-paid retirement benefits are worth 23% of annual salaries. Now look, this is, before we talk about, we don't even need to talk about should government employees have these big pension programs or not. Before we talk about that, can we just agree, can you and I just agree that any conversation about compensation should include pensions, retirement contributions, right? I mean, that is part of what somebody is earning. And look, in the case of, you may have heard of pension spiking, right? Now that's the really bad practice where insiders get together and they move people through these really high paying jobs right at the end of their career. You'll see people in some school districts where they're a little bit, can I say shady? Right? Where they'll cycle people right at the end of their career through a district office position or through a principal position. They're a teacher for their whole career, and then the last 3 years, all of a sudden they get some big bump in pay because that spikes their lifetime pension benefits. This is something I'm actually going to show you later this week, how you can look at your own school district and see whether people are doing this. You can see the pension, the pension payments that people are accruing, and we can all understand this side of teacher pay. Look, again, you can think it's a great system, you can think it's a terrible system. I tend to think that allowing politicians, because any public sector pension is allowing a politician to make a promise based on future tax revenue and in a future situation and investment returns and all these things that have to happen long after that politician is likely to not only be out of office, but in many cases, not even be alive anymore, right? If you think it's a good idea to allow politicians to make those kind of promises, well, I mean, God bless your optimism. But whatever you think about this ought to be a part of the conversation about teacher pay. I mean, along with a lot of other things. Now, let me just mention a few other things here that go into compensation for teachers that I think we ought to include, right? There are lots of other valuable benefits. And you know, if you watch the show on a regular basis, I've supported a pay raise for teachers. I thought that teachers should get a pay raise. So I'm not arguing against that at all. But look, we have pensions that are extremely valuable here, right, that are worth a lot of money. I mean, in the case of some people, if they start out as a teacher very young and therefore they're able to retire relatively young, right, I mean, you think about continuing to get 60% of your pay for the rest of your life, that's a lot of money, right? That's not a small thing. Again, this should be a part of the conversation. So should job security, right? The fact that people get tenure after 2 years of teaching, that is worth a lot of money, right? Reliability, dependability, job security is worth a lot of money. So are the kinds of protections that go along with that, right? I mean, that kind of job security is one thing, but you think about teachers in particular, in many cases they have a union contract that gives them all these special protections that most people in the economy don't have, and then they have civil service protections that nobody in the private sector has, right? Again, all these things are worth money. They have a cash value. They have a benefit, right? Okay, what else? A couple other things here. I'm going to say this despite the fact that it's become politically, they're trying to make it politically incorrect to say this. I'm going to say it anyway because I don't care. It's a great vacation package, right? I mean, it is. I'm sorry. I know, oh yeah, I spend all summer. Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, I think back to the teachers that I had when I was in school, and they went on great vacations during the summer. Yeah, so, you know, spring break. I mean, they got to ski during winter vacation. We called it Christmas vacation back then, I think still. I mean, look, those are benefits. Again, those are benefits, and I understand why the teachers union and some people want to downplay those things and claim that people spend all summer grading papers. I'm sorry, I don't buy it. I don't believe it, and I'm not going to let people bully me out of talking about things like this that actually matter. And the last point, for some people, it's a job that they really love, and that's worth a lot too. Okay, there we go. Missing money. Right? That is money that gets missed in these public debates. That is value that people actually take home, that people actually appreciate. In some cases, literal money value in the case of pensions. And in other cases, just if you got a great vacation package at your job, right? That matters. That's part of your compensation. It should not get missed in these policy debates. Okay, blue state blues. I've got a couple of great blue state blues stories for you here. Venezuela. Poor Venezuela. Well, the poor people of Venezuela. Chevron Corporation is evacuating executives, it has probably finished evacuating executives from Venezuela after several of their people were arrested by the state in a contract dispute, right? So the state has a state oil company that contracts with some private companies to try to get private investment, try to get help down there. They desperately need companies like Chevron in Venezuela. Right? If they're going to have any fiscal success in Venezuela, it's going to have to come from partnerships with companies like Chevron that can actually invest in the oil that Venezuela sits on, some of the largest reserves in the world, despite the fact that it is a bankrupt basket case. But Chevron is fleeing the country because what do totalitarian countries do? Right? In the end, they throw their weight around. In the end, they arrest people, and that's what's been happening there. And in the end, Chevron winds up pulling out. I mean, this really is, all of these things come together to create a very dire humanitarian situation in Venezuela, and it all comes from Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro. It all comes from this idea that the state should control everything and everybody, and look, that's and that there should be no private property rights, right? We had a guest on the radio show last year who pointed out, you can have some fairly dictatorial bad actor regimes, but if they protect private property rights, you can actually have an economy that's sort of successful, that sort of moves along. You can actually have a rising standard of living, even with a thug regime. And nobody's defending thug regimes. We're just pointing out that what it is that actually makes people really poor and leads to people starving to death and dying because they can't get medicines that are easily available around the rest of the world, right? And it's not even just a totalitarian regime, it's a Marxist totalitarian regime that violates people's property rights, that doesn't even pretend to give people due process rights, as Chevron has been experiencing over the last week or so. And when you have that, people can't invest, people can't, people can't hire people and build businesses and do the things that allow people to have, not wealth in the American sense, just wealth in the sense of being able to feed your family, right? That's what they lack in Venezuela. Blue State Blues Part 2, Nuevo Venezuela. Well, that's what they want to be. California, Cal Exit, they're actually out gathering signatures for Cal Exit. They are pushing ahead with getting California out of the United States. And it's so crazy what you read from California. I mean, the worst poverty in the United States, when you factor in the cost of living, right? Because what is poverty in California is higher than it is in most of the rest of the country because things there are so expensive, right? So you've got the worst poverty in the United States, which also means you've got the worst income inequality in the United States, right? Because California, you've got very, very wealthy liberals and very, very poor liberals, and you got the middle class who can't find enough U-Haul trucks to move out of there, right? And what they say is, they say, well, we have a huge economy, we're very wealthy, and so, you know, we could go it on our own, right? This is what some of these hardcore lefties who want to take California out of the United States, this is what they say. We're rich. Look how rich we are. Look how much money we have. Look how many palm trees we have, right? And anybody who knows the history of Venezuela, just saying, they've got some palm trees down there, right? They had a lot of wealth down there. They sit, I mean, California has got some oil, but not like Venezuela, right? If you look at the natural resources under Venezuela versus the natural resources under California, it's not even close. Venezuela, if they could actually tap into those resources, could be far more wealthy than California. California's wealth comes from a system that protects private property rights, that protects individual human rights, that allows people to invest and create and innovate and actually appreciate the results of taking all those risks, right? I mean, they don't get it out there. I mean, it is a tragedy. It's the kind of tragedy that happens when people are so wealthy that they forget how they got there. But look, that's Blue State Blues for the day. That's the Trent England Show for the day. Thanks so much for watching or for listening to the Trent England Show. Remember, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/OCPA-Think or facebook.com/Trent England Show. We're on iTunes. We are on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Trent England. You can find us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes. Did I already say? I think I already said iTunes. And the whole show archive is at OCPAthink.org, where you can find a lot of analysis of what has happened during this Oklahoma legislative session. Of course, we're going to cover more of that later this week, as I mentioned earlier in the program. Thank you so much for watching.